just living the week.
Julian, you hit the barber recently? You're looking fresh
I
over there.
did. Thank you. It was this morning actually.
Ah,
So very fresh.
what kind of haircut cadence are you on these days? Like, how often do you have to
A
go in and see
month.
the barber?
A month. I used to do like, I mean, last year I think I did 8 months. But no,
Did we get shoulder length hair, Julian? Did we all miss
no,
this?
almost, but no,
Ah,
not that crazy, unfortunately. But yeah, I'm at like between 3 to 5 weeks, so I would say average like a month. Yeah,
nice.
yeah,
Looking good. Listen, everybody else, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Let us know when's the last time you got a haircut. Inquiring minds want to know. Drop your travel questions in below or to the side, wherever it is on your screen. And we're going to try to get to as many as we can, whether they're about best places to eat in Rome, cheapest flights we've seen to Paris, whatever's on your mind, we're going to try to get to it. Very first question we have to answer no matter what, as is SCF law. So drop those questions in and we're going to go ahead and get rolling. Julian, floor is
yeah.
yours.
All right. We've got a couple comments to start us off. Greg says, "Hey, travelers," and Carl says, "Hello, all."
What's up, Greg? What's up, Carl?
The first question comes from our very good friend Allison.
What's up,
She says,
Allison?
"Hey guys, hope you're having a great week. Do you have any guidance on finding affordable hotels in the Greek islands? Ooh, looking at Ia, Santorini, and rates for next spring are a bit nutty. Use the Hilton price match to get a good deal in Athens. I prefer not to use Airbnb because of how they often cause housing shortages for locals."
My first piece of advice you might not like is to go to a Greek island other than Santorini. Not that Santorini is not amazing, beautiful. It attracts a crowd that is used to paying expensive rates for hotels. It is a beautiful island that is very, very popular, and that's why you see some pretty exorbitant rates in a way that you don't see in some nearby islands, Naxos, Paros, other places nearby that you can get much cheaper. But let's take Santorini itself. How do you go about getting the best rate possible? In addition to doing the normal stuff, comparison shopping, not just searching on Hyatt.com, not just searching on Marriott.com, but using some of the hotel aggregators, hotels.com, Google Hotels, wherever your preferred place to search is, making sure that you go that way. But then also remembering that with many hotels, the rate that you see is refundable. It's essentially just a reservation that you don't have to necessarily prepay for. You might get a slight discount by prepaying, but generally speaking, especially the fact that you're 6 months out, it's not worth prepaying because, especially with COVID and travel situation, there's enough uncertainty that you don't want to have yourself locked in. Instead, booking a refundable rate, booking the rate that is cancelable, is going to be your best bet for not only giving yourself flexibility in case plans change, but also giving yourself the opportunity to get a cheaper price if the price comes down. It's essentially locking in today's price and making it heads I win, tails you lose. Because if the price goes up, no big deal. You've already got it booked. If the price goes down, you can just cancel and rebook at the lower rate. And so that's why I make using those refundable rates, which tend to be standard with hotels, but make sure at Bookout that you're not booking a non-refundable rate. Using those refundable rates to your advantage is generally a good plan. And unlike airlines, unlike with flight prices where, in the last like month or a few weeks, prices tend to really skyrocket. That's not generally the case with hotels. Hotels tend to stay much more kind of average. There's far less volatility. And so even, it might be the case that even a few weeks before your stay or even a few days, it might drop in price. And so it's worth, again, having that refundable rate and then just hoping sometime over the next 6 months, the prices get cheaper.
Yeah, it's you started off your answer pretty accurate, where it's just Santorini, no matter what, is going to be more of the expensive island.
You've been to Santorini, haven't you, Julian?
I have. Yeah. It was beautiful, like you said. It was amazing. But it is not the cheapest place to be, I would say. For hotels, I don't even know if they have it, but I always like to cross check with like Costco travel too. kind of any of these sites that you use and go to. Yeah, Santorini, amazing. Of course, beautiful. Just hard to find cheaper housing there.
It's a toughie.
Yeah. Um, Next question from our friend KK. How about that European announcement? I read the email sent by SEF. Awesome.
Yeah, look, we had 2 weeks in a row with talking about news between travel between the U.S. and Europe. First was the one about the EU ban on Americans. I put that in air quotes because almost nowhere in Europe ultimately said we're not welcoming American visitors. To the contrary, almost every single country right now in Europe is open and accessible to you as an American traveler. In some countries, you may have to be fully vaccinated and show that proof of vaccination. You may have to bring a recent negative test, but there's only, gosh, I think 2 or 3 countries in Europe at this point that either don't let you in or require a mandatory quarantine. So first, we wanted to make sure that was cleared up. People didn't read those headlines from August and assume, oh, well, I just can't go to Europe now. Absolutely not the case. To wit, we have some of our teammates right now who are in Europe right now, who are in Italy and elsewhere. One of our teammates just got back from Iceland. It is
Yeah.
very much open and accessible for vaccinated Americans. Secondly, the fact that the U.S. just announced it's going to be reopening soon for European travelers who had been banned from entering the U.S. This was based on the COVID situation all the way back in March 2020. Many folks don't know that for the past 18 months, people from France, Spain, Italy, Germany, Netherlands, the United Kingdom were not allowed to come visit the United States, even if they had been fully vaccinated. Meanwhile, unvaccinated travelers from places like, Russia, I don't know, Grenada, which has one of the highest per capita case rates, and elsewhere around the world, even unvaccinated travelers from those places were welcome in the US. So I was really glad to see this change in policy and that Europeans are now going to be able to visit the US, visit loved ones, family, friends, just tourists, and that increase in tourism is going to lead to more flights between the US and Europe with more demand and ultimately lead to even cheaper prices between the US and Europe. It's hard to imagine they can get that much cheaper than we've been seeing in the past few weeks. I mean, gosh, we've been seeing those flights from like Billings, Montana to Barcelona for $275 round trip, deals like that. But the fact of more competition at least means we're going to see more and more frequent deals like that between the US and Europe. So I think this is great news for all of us cheap flight lovers.
Yeah. Just because we just talked about this question, Allison has like a follow up. It's if you have another favorite island, would love the Rex. Yeah, if for all the people watching, like if you have any island recommendations, please drop them for Allison. I've heard Crete a lot. I've
Yeah,
actually never been. It's a place I want to go, but I think when people are like not Santorini, but let's like what else? I think Crete is always that second answer for me. So that's definitely something
absolutely.
that
Yeah, I
I would
know
like to
a
check out.
number of folks on the SCF team here have been to Crete and said
Yeah.
wonderful things, especially if you get out of, I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, but Heraclion, especially if you get out of the city and start to go more into the countryside of Crete.
Yeah. Um, Dina was answering your first question, which is, about haircuts. And Dina said 8 inches off in June after 18 months of gray.
Wow.
Yeah.
That must have been that must have taken
8 inches.
some real intestinal fortitude for that, Dina. Well done.
Katie, with our next question, goes, "Hey guys, I just found out I have to go to Phoenix from Boston at Christmas time. It's so expensive. Any chance prices will come down?"
Oh boy. Okay, so a few things to recommend here. First, you're absolutely right. Christmas is one of the most expensive times of year to travel, and this is true every single year. The best time to book those holiday flights is opposite season. So would have been the best time to have booked those flights would have been in the summer. The second best time to book those flights is basically now. The worst time to book those flights would be in late November, early December. They're only going to get pricier. So here's how I would approach it. First, if you have any frequent flyer miles sitting around, these can be really good value.
Yeah.
Maybe it costs $400 to fly an American, but maybe they have an award seat available for just 15,000 miles round trip, say. Checking with those miles and seeing if you can get a cheap award seat. Second, checking Southwest.com separately. Their fares do not show up on Google Flights, on Expedia, Orbitz, any of those. Got to search direct. Third, if you feel comfortable with it, check out skiplagged.com. This is one of the flight search engines that helps show you hidden city ticketing. Again, you want to make sure you read the FAQ, understand how hidden city ticketing works, but it can oftentimes, especially if you're flying to a hub like Phoenix, can save significant money on it. And then last but not least, I would probably try to book this sooner rather than later. Again, sometime in the next couple of weeks. If it's like $700 right now, don't book today. Hold off a little bit, but I would set myself an internal deadline of booking sometime in the next 2 to 3 weeks when I feel like, yes, it's came down a little bit. It's at an okay price. And remembering that, look, if the price continues to drop, you can always cancel, rebook at the lower price, and then you're going to get a flight credit for that difference. You'll get, let's say you book it at $400 and next week it drops to $350. You can cancel and rebook and get that $50 difference back. Again, it's going to be in the form of a travel credit, not in the form of cash, but I'd rather have that $50 voucher than not have it. But there's not going to be an absolute silver bullet here. Just remembering that it is one of the more expensive times of year to travel.
Yeah. Kevin has our next question. And I'm glad he specified because his original question was a little broad. But Kevin asked, what are your thoughts about the fall 2022 travel period, specifically Europe and Italy?
My best guess is that by next summer 2022, European travel numbers are going to basically be on par with what they were in 2019. That for the next 6 months, we're still going to see, lower tourism numbers, less just sort of not folks maybe still a little bit hesitant about traveling internationally. But I think by next summer, you're going to see that mostly dissipate and that many, many folks who hadn't felt comfortable traveling overseas are going to make this their first big trip time. And I think that's going to continue after the summer. I mean, there's certainly fewer tourists in the fall in Europe than there are in the summer. And I think actually visiting in the fall any year is one of the best times to go because you have cheaper flights than the summer. You have cheaper hotels and car rentals or activities or things like that, not nearly as packed with tourists. It's soccer season if you want to go see any games, whether you're in Spain or Italy or England. So I think it's a great time to go. I would just expect that travel and tourism numbers are going to be rebounded significantly from where they are right now. I think for anybody who is interested and inclined in visiting sooner, we've talked about this window of opportunity to visit now and for the kind of immediate future where you can be in some of these iconic tourist destinations with a fraction of the tourist crowds. I mean, when else in our lifetime are you going to have the opportunity to be somewhere like in Venice or Barcelona or Paris with so few other tourists around? Hopefully never. Hopefully, we don't see anything like this pandemic again in our lifetimes. But that's why I think for folks who are interested and inclined to travel sooner, there's a window of opportunity that I think is going to close by next summer.
Yeah. You said the numbers will look about, similar to 2019 pre-pandemic. But we've also been seeing a lot of search numbers, TSA numbers, a lot of the times being higher than it was in the 2019 numbers. Do you see Europe travel actually beating out, or 2022 Europe travel beating out pre-pandemic numbers?
My best guess, I would say no. I would say it'll get, pretty close, maybe, like 90, 95%, maybe, you'll have some days here and there where it'll exceed it. I could be wrong. And I hope I'm wrong. I hope this means, because if it exceeds it, that means people are excited about travel.
Of course.
Now they're going. It means hopefully the pandemic situation has continued to subside. But my best guess is we'll be basically close to on par with pre-pandemic numbers by next summer.
Yeah, there you go. Amanda says, "What's up, SEF?" Hello.
What's up, Amanda?
Yeah. Paula asks, "Do you think Americans will need the EU QR code for travel in December?"
It's going to vary country to country. So this is the, will you need to either show proof of vaccination, or in some countries you may even need to show that not only to get into the country. In some countries you may need it to, for instance, go to an indoor restaurant or go to a theater or a museum. That's how it is in most of France right now. There are a few other countries as well. I would expect that will continue through December. I don't see that going away anytime in the next few months. I could see those starting to really loosen up next year. That maybe you don't have to necessarily show proof of vaccination, but it's mostly kind of an unknown medical question, depending on what is the course of the virus over the next 3, 6, 12 months, and that's above my pay grade.
Yeah. Clairol said, "Yay, I made it to your live. Welcome."
Hey, how's it going? Welcome.
Sarah asked, "Do cheap flights to Curacao ever turn up? I've seen a few to the Caribbean. Thanks. I always hate saying controversial words or pronunciations on Facebook Live, but I haven't seen Curacao."
They do. Not quite as common as, say, cheap flights to Aruba, right nearby, one of the other Dutch, I want to say Dutch Antilles Islands, the ABC Islands. But yes, they do pop up. And I think we're going to see more and more, again, as international tourism demand starts to pick up. A lot of folks make the mistake of thinking, oh, well, if people are more excited about traveling internationally, that higher demand is going to lead to higher prices, right? Like if more people want to go to Europe, more people want to go to Curacao, that means we're going to see higher fares. But what a lot of folks miss in thinking about that is that the supply of flights is not fixed. And in fact, the supply of flights is still significantly diminished from where it was pre-pandemic. And so when there's a jump in demand, whether it's flights to the Caribbean, whether it's flights to Europe or anywhere, the airlines see that and they want to get that demand. They want to sell tickets to the people who want to fly those places. And so they end up adding more capacity, more flights, larger planes, more seats to those destinations. And so this is why an increase in demand is often met with an increase in supply. And, oftentimes that means that prices are either a wash or sometimes even go down significantly when there's that increase in demand because the supply ends up going up even faster.
Yeah. Two things on that as well. You're right. We definitely see deals to Aruba more frequently, but we also, I'd say if we do see deals to Curacao, a lot of times it's through New York. So that's another thing to keep an eye out. If you don't live too far, or if it's not too much of a hassle for you, obviously everybody has different thinking there. But if you are able to easily and cheaply go to or fly to New York and then possibly go to Curacao from there, that's also an option. And then also love your profile picture.
That's
the pumpkin.
God, what's the artist's name again?
Kusama.
Yes.
Yeah.
I saw her.
Yeah.
I remember going and visiting her installation in London in 2016.
Ooh,
got the classic one with the pumpkins and the infinity room, and it was beautiful. I felt like one of those where I was like 2 months ahead of the curve, and then I saw it popping up everywhere. But now every time I see the pumpkin, I'm like, oh man, I love that. So yeah,
it is very cool. Yeah, they have. I think there's an installation in the Bronx Botanical Gardens now as well.
Oh, cool.
So I was there a couple months. I don't know. Time is just not. Yeah. Anyways, very cool profile picture. CD asked, "I'm transiting in Munich on way to Athens. Do I have to go through passport and immigration? Transit time is only an hour. Same terminal arriving and departing."
It's going to vary airport to airport. Some require you to, some require you not to. And sometimes it depends on where you're traveling to. I am pretty sure. Gosh. You know what? I'm actually not 100% sure in terms of whether or not you're going to have to in this particular instance. Usually, for instance, when you're flying what's called non-Schengen to non-Schengen. So let's say you're transiting you're flying like New York to Munich and then Munich to, I don't know, Kiev in Ukraine. It's not within the Schengen zone. Then usually that is not something that you have to go through passport and immigration for. I'm not 100, but because I believe Athens is in the Schengen zone, you might have to. I would look on the airport website. They usually have pretty good and easy information where you say where you're arriving from and where you're flying to, and it'll tell you whether or not you need to do these things. I just don't want to. I just want to make sure I'm not giving you bad information here.
Yeah. All right. Next question comes from Carl. Hey, Carl. Carl says, since the U.S. is opening up Euro travel, can we expect an increase in prices to Europe? I would love to get on a Delta flight, increase my status for my now TAP flight to Rome, but it seems so pricey in comparison. I would think more competition would drive down prices for SEF to notice rather than the other way around. What's your thoughts?
So there's a funny aspect of travel that many folks don't necessarily know about, and that's that when you look at how people tend to book flights, price is by far the most important factor. But one of the following factors after price is actually you see this that travelers tend to have a slight preference for their home country's airlines over a foreign airline. So an American traveler on average is more likely to book a flight on Delta than they are to book a flight on, let's say, Lot Polish or TAP or Alitalia or something like that. Now, the reason why I bring this up is that while Americans have been able to visit Europe for most of 2021, and you've seen the capacity of American airlines or US airlines, I should say, flying eastward to Europe really kind of increased significantly from where it had been in 2020, let's say. You haven't necessarily seen quite the same increase among European airlines flying west to the US. And that's in part because they might not expect to see quite as many bookings. You know, if Air France is flying from Paris to New York, they might not see as many bookings as a Delta might expect to, or a United Airlines. And so the fact now that Europeans can fly to the US, I think is going to induce a lot of those European airlines to add capacity. They're still significantly lower than they had been pre-pandemic. And so as a result, that added capacity is going to just increase the competition on flights between the US and Europe and result in cheaper flights, even on airlines like American, like Delta, like JetBlue, and others. So I think this is good news for airfare in general. It's the same cycle we've seen throughout the pandemic, that when a country reopens, like Iceland, like Greece, like Croatia, like the EU, and now like the US, that tends to lead to a spike in demand, but an even larger spike in supply. And I think we're going to see cheaper flights and more frequent cheap flights as a result.
Yeah. Going to sort of combine these next two questions. Adam asks, "What? Oh, I just lost my place. What about Chile opening up? What have you heard?" And then, not second part, but adding on to that question, Cheryl asks, "Do you think Australia will open up? Need to fly there March 26th." So Chile and then Australia March 26th.
So Chile, I don't know. I don't have any news on it. I'm surprised that they haven't reopened. They, were reopened earlier in the year, went through a pretty bad COVID wave that caused that led them to close down for international tourism. One of the reasons why I'm surprised that they haven't reopened yet is their vaccination rate is very high at this point. I mean, 78% and climbing. The US, for comparison, is at about 64% share of the population who's gotten at least one dose. And so I don't, have inside information, magic ball, but for many countries, they're looking at vaccination rate of their own citizenry as this sort of primary metric by which to decide when and where whether to reopen. I'm hopeful it'll be sooner rather than later, but I don't have like a sort of crystal ball to say when that will be. With Australia, heads of two major airlines, the largest Australian airline, Qantas, and then Air Canada as well, have indicated that they're going to reopen for travel between North America and Australia by Christmas. that is a very positive sign to me.
Yeah.
I think that is not official. I don't think you can take that to the bank, but I think that is. I would certainly rather have airline officials saying we expect this to happen by Christmas, because they're constantly in touch with lawmakers, and they might have much more inside information than I do, for instance. So I look to their guidance that late December is when we can expect a reopening of Australia for international travel. And you see it for, they're one of the places that have really targeted their vaccination rate as the primary metric. Today, Australia's vaccination rate is 63%, and it's been
Wow.
climbing, pretty rapidly. Again, we said America is just about at 64%. Australia is probably going to pass the US later this week. I mean, even a month ago, Australia was at 46%. A month before that, they were at about 30%. And so they're climbing quickly. I think that late December timeline is very reasonable to expect. The question that still remains unanswered, and we're just going to have to wait and see, is whether or not that reopening includes a mandatory quarantine or not. If it includes a mandatory quarantine, in my mind, that's not a tourism reopening. That's a reopening that maybe, some family members who really have been hoping to visit one another figure it's worth it for a 7 or 10 or 14-day quarantine to be able to be reunited. I don't know of any travelers or tourists who are willing to endure a lengthy quarantine in order to take a trip there. And so will this late December reopening for Australia include that quarantine or not? I'm hopeful it won't, but time will tell.
Yeah. All right. One final question.
Let's do it.
Cool. Before that one final question, I'm going to try to half sneak one in. If anyone has good solo travel destinations, please let Elizabeth know. She's looking for good trips for singles. So all of your solo travel tips, please let her know. Final question comes from Meredith. Meredith asks, so want to take the family to Tuscany and Rome the week after Christmas. Oh, okay. So Christmas, New Year's timeline we're looking at. Where are food sources to find out what is open and closed due to holidays and COVID? Honestly, I'm curious as well.
I think she probably meant good sources.
Oh, that, yeah, that actually interesting.
Guess. I could be wrong.
Both could work. Yeah, good sources, but also food sources. Like, I don't know what restaurants are open or closed due to holidays or COVID. So, but yes, good sources probably makes more sense. And do you think prices will go down because it is not peak travel to Italy?
So in terms of COVID, I would be pretty surprised if there were any major new restrictions on travel to Italy. If you've been fully vaccinated, I think there's a very, very, very high likelihood that you would be able to take that trip. What's going to be open or closed around the holidays, I don't have personal insight on that. If anybody in the comment section has been to Italy around the Christmas, New Year's time, please let's hook up Meredith with some intel here. I've been in early December when I took that $130 flight to Milan. That was in early December. And there was a bunch of, it's a wonderful, wonderful time to be in Europe because you have all the Christmas markets happening. You can go skiing if you want to. It's just a really kind of fun, beautiful time to be there. Actually, now that I think about it, I was there in early December in Rome as well. It can get kind of rainy sometimes, but I really enjoyed it. You feel a lot of that like festive holiday spirit there. But in terms of prices, I would not assume that it's not going to be peak time to travel there. Instead, the Christmas, New Year's period is a very, very expensive time of year to travel basically anywhere. It's just, there's so many people hoping to travel then, very popular, people with time off work, just it's a tough time to travel. If you're hoping to, you're dead set on it, trying to book sooner rather than later, don't put it off booking until November, December, because prices are only going to go up. Trying to book here in the next few weeks is going to be your best bet. And remembering that you automatically have flexibility if your plans change, if you don't want to take that Christmas trip anymore, as long as you're not booked in basic economy, or even if you're booked in basic economy on United or Delta, you automatically get flexibility to change your travel dates without having to pay any penalty. So you can push that trip to February, to April, even to next summer without paying any penalty. If the new dates you switch to are more expensive, you have to cover that fare difference. But if the new dates are cheaper, you actually get the difference back in the form of a travel credit. So all the more reason to be prioritizing cheap flights. The last thing that I would say here is that if this is just a vacation, if you're, want to take a kind of holiday trip, my recommendation would be to not do it over Christmas and New Year's, but instead to do it over Thanksgiving. And the reason why I think you should do it over Thanksgiving it is the hidden best week for international travel. Thanksgiving, not many people think of as a cheap time to fly, but that's because for most of us, we're flying domestically. We're going home to visit family, friends, have some turkey, watch football. It's great. But all that domestic travel, it spikes the demand and leads to really expensive flights. Whereas for international flights, airlines see far more empty seats. I mean, all those people traveling domestically are by definition not traveling internationally. So airlines have to ultimately cut the price on flights to places like Rome, like Paris, like Barcelona. And so maybe you've already got some time off work. I think, you're going to be able to get really cheap flights, especially compared to domestic flights. And you'll start to see some of those Christmas markets really pop up by late November. So I think it's a great time to travel. But depends how flexible your schedule is. For anybody else hoping to travel over Thanksgiving, and if your family would understand, or if they might even like to come with you, going internationally is a great play for that week. Anyway, Thank you all so much for these wonderful, wonderful questions. It is such a pleasure to be with you all, to chat. Thank you for folks who just chimed in to help out when we didn't have the answers.
Yeah.
And if we didn't get to your question this week, we're going to try to get to as many as we can next time. Thanks, Julian, my main man, the main host.